Welcome back to the Bearded Console Gamer. Now, last Sunday, as part of Ubisoft Forward, we got an absolute smorgasbord of information on the upcoming title Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We got some insights into combat and world exploration, along with a ton of new gameplay features. So without further ado, here are 30 things we learned about the upcoming Viking adventure, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. First up, it was revealed that you are not going to have to wait long before beginning your own Viking adventure, as the next game in the AC franchise is set to launch on November 17th this year on Xbox One, PS4, PC, and Stadia, if you're into that. Anyway, onto the juicy bits. The AC fight system has been updated and refreshed for the new game in order to deliver an intense combat experience that the developers hope is going to put you in the mindset of a brutal Viking warrior. For starters, we've been given access to a new range of weaponry. The Viking harpoon, for example, lets you brutally dismember your foes, or you could opt to huck a bunch of throwing axes at anyone who gives you a sideward glance. Valhalla will let you dual wield any two weapons you want, and that could lead to a huge amount of versatility, allowing you to tailor your equipment to your preferred combat style. Want to use a hammer and a harpoon in tandem? No problem. Two shields? It's a little weird, but go and knock yourself out. You can also now stun your enemies and then close in to deliver a finishing blow, or simply use the new system to prevent hostiles from getting too close. From the new gameplay, it looks like enemies have a separate stun bar located above their regular health bar. Once this gauge is depleted, they enter into a stunned state. I'm guessing that certain weapons are going to be more effective at dealing stun damage, and others will have a greater effect on health. According to the Ubisoft Forward presentation, Valhalla is going to boast the largest variety of enemies ever to feature in an Assassin's Creed game. Each of these enemies is going to offer a slightly different challenge, and some will coordinate with their brothers in arms in order to perform special attacks against Eivor. This will add an element of tactical thinking, as it's unlikely you'll use the same tactics to bring down this beefcake as you would this agile boy. On the enemies note, it seems like AC really upped its score game. Gratuitous dismemberment may well be the new norm for the franchise. Your health bar won't automatically refill itself upon exiting combat, which was the series' norm to date. Instead, Eivor will have to hunt, forage, or fish in order to recuperate. Materials gained from these activities can be used to up the level of your equipment, which was the case in previous games like Black Flag. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you'll get to build up your own settlement. In this scene, you can see that you start with nothing more than a rickety dock and a bare patch of land. Over time, you spend resources, building tents and then cabins that grant you access to better tools and new services. But upgrading your settlement will require a lot of resources, and to get them, you'll need to take to your longship and raid. While sailing down England's winding rivers by longship, you can opt to raid locations dotted on the shoreline. Triggering a raid will see you and your soldiers disembark and engage the defending forces, brutally murder these poor SOBs, and make what was theirs yours. During these skirmishes, you can set buildings alight by firing flaming arrows at thatch roofs, a nice little piece of environmental destruction that could help bring home the brutality of a Viking raid. If the battle goes south and your crew members get injured, you can revive them by holding Y, allowing them to get back into the fray. At which point, I assume they will proceed to set roofs on fire, followed by some light pillaging. Valhalla lets you keep track of your allies and future opportunities via the Alliance map, which is located in the building at the heart of your newfound settlement. The recent gameplay also revealed that when not embarked on a longship, Eivor will use a horse to traverse the large open world. While exploring this vast open world, Eivor will be able to visit temples and landmarks and solve terrain-based puzzles in order to gain benefits for himself, herself, or the settlement. At points throughout the game's main storyline, massive castle assaults will be triggered, which will see Eivor and their army attempt to storm the walls of a Saxon fortress or two. These look like huge set pieces that'll be pivotal in deciding the fate of entire regions. In the lead up to these battles, Eivor must raise an army, essentially by going around a province and solving the problems of the people and encouraging them to fight. It also sounds like you'll be able to sabotage elements of the castle prior to attacking, making for an easier battle. In Valhalla, not all enemies are Saxon and not all Vikings are going to be your friends. At points in the story, it looks like you're pitted against other powerful Vikings who have made their way to England. A fair chunk of the 30-minute gameplay walkthrough that took place after Ubisoft Forward involved Eivor dealing with a troublesome Viking called Rued. Boss battles have returned, and some, including the aforementioned Rued, will bring their pets along for the fight. That's right, just like in AC Odyssey, the developers of Valhalla are determined to give us all PTSD by making us brutally put down wolves, the doggos of the wild. Speaking of angry warpups, multiple times throughout the new gameplay, Eivor is referred to as Wolf-Kissed. The title must form part of the legend that has sprung up around the protagonist, perhaps around their origin story, and it'll be interesting to learn more about this when we finally get our hands on the game. Eagle Vision, the otherworldly sense by which assassins have navigated the world up until now, has been replaced with Odin Sight. When triggered, this new take on an old ability manifests itself as a blue pulse emanating outward from the player. This mechanic highlights interactable objects scattered throughout the world that could give Eivor an edge in combat or perhaps assist in exploration, by, for example, highlighting tracks in the wilderness. Players will be able to find books of knowledge scattered throughout the world that will allow Eivor to learn new abilities. Finding the books will encourage world exploration and potentially give Eivor the edge in combat. You'll also be able to build cairns in order to earn skill points. Eivor will occasionally stumble across offering altars on which she can lay, well, offerings. There isn't much information as to what role these offering stones are going to play in progression. They could simply exist to add flavour to the world, but I doubt it. On a creepier note, there are macabre altars that seem to be linked to a shadowy group called the Daughters of Lyrion. In this scene, Eivor is doused with a hallucinogen, which gives a character called Rhaegon the appearance of having otherworldly powers. It's a nice way to set up a boss fight, and it'll be interesting to see just how many of these altars are lurking in the Saxon countryside. As the game progresses, you'll be able to tattoo Eivor at your settlement. In order to get new ink, the player will need to find and chase down blueprints in the same way that you'd run down shanties in Black Flag. Speaking of Black Flag, Ubisoft seems to have gone to lengths to make the protagonist's ship a home from home for the player. During longship voyages, crew members will be able to tell stories of their past and their experiences with Eivor, and even sing Viking songs. There's real pressure here to come up with catchy tunes, as the shanties from previous games hold a special place in the hearts of AC veterans. If you really want to let go and just listen to the tall tales, you can have your longbow automatically follow the river's path, in the same way that you've managed to get a horse to just automatically follow a road's path in previous AC games. Speaking of making the longship a home from home, it will be possible to recruit a cat to the crew of your longship. Whether this feline compatriot will join in the raids is unknown as of writing. As was the case in Odyssey, the player will have different dialogue options when talking to in-game characters, and the choices made in these instances can materially affect how the game is going to play out. You can also engage in verbal sparring matches with certain NPCs, which is apparently something that occurred in Viking culture. During these ancient rap battles, you'll need to answer your opponent with a pithy sentence, and ideally one that rhymes. Some more details were divulged by Ubisoft representatives during an interview with IGN. Romance options will be returning to the game, and the romance options aren't affected by Eivor's gender. The developers also revealed that throughout the game, you'll be able to switch Eivor's gender at will, and that the Animus will have new powers. Valhalla's narrative director, Darby McDevitt, confirmed to IGN, "You can go into the Animus layer of our game. There's an option to change the memory stream. To explain why it would spoil a long-running secret, but I will say that the whole reason why you can switch Eivor's gender back and forth fully embraces the often overlooked science fiction nature of our series. We've got this thing that's called genetic memory, and we've got this Animus. What are all the ways you can play with that, and how could we leverage that to make a character that you could choose to be male or female? We've found a way that we think is pretty satisfying." End quote. These new Animus powers will include narrative elements that provide a lore-based explanation as to why Eivor is able to freely switch genders. It's a nice move that will afford both male and female versions of Eivor a place in AC canon. The Animus will also be capable of transporting Layla Hassan, the modern-day protagonist of AC Odyssey and now Valhalla, into Viking-era England. When Eivor discovers an anomaly in the simulated Viking world, the simulation is paused by Hassan's handlers, and at this point, Layla is able to enter the world and close the rift by puzzle solving and parkouring her way to victory. It seems that Ubisoft has finally taken note of the jarring nature of the out-of-Animus segments in AC games, and they're trying to remedy the problem by bringing the real-world protagonist into the simulated ancient world, rather than dragging that player abruptly into the present. From what we've seen so far, there appears to be little to no presence of the precursor race known as the Isu in the game. The Isu featured heavily in AC Odyssey. Their structures were found dotted around the Grecian world, and they played a pivotal part in the main story of the game. Of course, their absence from gameplay and trailers for Valhalla doesn't mean that their fingerprint won't be all over the simulated ancient Viking world, but it's possible. My personal prediction is that the Isu will be in there. I think it's very likely there will be, and at some point you'll be sent to recover King Arthur's sword for Eivor to wield, and it will of course end up being an Isu relic. And that's it, 30 things we learned about Valhalla from the Ubisoft Forward presentation and beyond. If I missed any, let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more gaming news, reactions, and roundups.